I decided I didn't look ridiculous enough. So I went and found 2010's most hated hat, the Trilby, often mistaken for the fedora. So I figure, we're doing some atheist content. Might as well. Hardest atheism questions answered in 1 minute. Biology debunks atheism. Muslim video.
Couldn't this universe have come into being by chance, out of billions of possibilities?
Yeah.
If God created everything, how did God come into existence? Doesn't he need a creator too?
Yeah, he probably would.
What do you say to a materialist
If you think that the universe needs a creator, I don't see why God wouldn't.
says that I don't believe what I don't see?
I don't know.
If the science and Quran contradict each other, which one you choose?
Science.
We're going to be asking you questions regarding atheism. You have 60 seconds for every question. Shall we begin?
Yeah.
What do you say to an atheist who says, I don't need a creator?
I would simply
All right. Let's go.
say it doesn't matter whether you think you need a creator or not. The question is there a creator? And if there is,
That's fair, honestly. I think that's a fair summation. The question of whether or not there is a creator is more valuable than the question of whether or not specifically an atheist had a creator. I mean, because an atheist did have a creator, their parents, right? So, that's already been answered to an extent.
is a creator, then there's going to be benefits in believing in the creator, and there's going to be consequences for not believing in the creator. So
I mean, not necessarily, because there could be a creator that doesn't care whether you believe in them or not, right? There could be a creator of the universe that simply is completely hands off and is just like, I created a universe, and doesn't particularly care if any sort of intelligent life that arises within that universe believes in that creator or not. Because human beings have used religion to control each other, there's always been this idea that, well, the creator must have some sort of interest in us. Because, religions don't just want, the idea of a, impersonal, ambiguous creator. They want the idea of a personal creator that's taking a vested interest in everything we do, because only through that particular idea of a creator can they control other people.
So the real question is not whether you think you want to believe in a creator or you think you need God or you don't. The real question is there a God? And for that, the answer is absolutely.
You could say that in a very refined voice and say, yes, well, the question is not whether you choose to believe in a creator. The question is there a creator? And the answer to that question is absolutely. Why? They're asking the follow-up question right here. How would you prove God to an atheist? So let's do it.
God to an atheist.
We have many different ways of showing that it's rational to believe in God.
All right.
My personal favorite is the biological argument. Take
Okay.
something as simple as the human brain.
Not simple at all, actually.
The human brain is vastly more complex than anything a human being has ever made. The human brain has certain components that work together in synergy. And when a part of the brain is damaged, the other parts take up the job.
Not necessarily. I mean, in some instances, yes, but there's a reason why brain damage exists as a concept. I mean, someone's brain is damaged. Sometimes other areas of the brain will take over. Other times, that person is now incapable of doing certain things. Other times, that person has now been irreparably damaged by that incident. Maybe they have no ability to control their anger now. Maybe they, have now inferior skills in, say, mathematics compared to what they used to. Or in some instances, they might even have superior skills in mathematics. Like I saw a special once about a guy who was able to calculate numbers faster than a calculator. And when they did some sort of MRI imaging stuff, they found that he wasn't doing math with the same part of his brain as most people do math. He was doing math with the part of the brain that's usually responsible for doing things like athletic performance, which is way more instantaneous and reflexive, like, whoa, And so he was able to conjure up the answers to advanced mathematical questions very quickly because the part of his brain that was in charge of figuring that out was, for some reason, a more reflexive and instantaneous part of his brain. So,
and the processing that the human brain does is unmatched. Have you ever looked
I mean, that's probably not going to be true for much longer.
around, you're using your mobile phone, you're recording something. After some time, your mobile will say memory full. Has that ever happened to you as a human being though?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stuff I don't remember. Yes. I mean, I don't get a little thing that says memory full, but there's definitely been things that I've forgotten. I think everyone has forgotten things. Like, people can forget things that they literally just did, like, oh shit, where did I put my keys? And your memory is just like, fuck if I know, dude. You're going to have to look for them, right? So yes, and not only that, if you actually look into the nature of memory, human memory is much less a concrete thing than we think of it as. You know, this is why sometimes people will be absolutely certain that, oh yeah, that car was blue. And then, you know, they see the car again and it's red. And it's like, oh, well, I remembered it being blue. It's because your memory is really just like quick sketch, you know, you know, a few little things, and then it fills in the blanks later with its own imagination. You know, there are people who have better memories than others, but no one has a perfect memory. No one has the quote unquote photographic memory that just perfectly recalls every detail of everything. Hey, if you like this clip, you might like the full stream, which I do every Sunday, more or less, over on the Pessimist Productions Patreon, link down below. Thank you kindly.
Have you ever seen different things? You look at the sunset, you go home, you look at your children. Do you ever get a flashing sign saying memory full?
No, your brain doesn't give you a flashing sign that says memory full. It just discards the stuff it doesn't like. It's just like, nah, you don't remember that. Like, what did I have for dinner last Tuesday? I don't fucking know. I don't remember.
Cannot record anymore. No, you remember what happened when you were a child. You remember your high school.
Yeah, some of it. Like, I cannot perfectly recall every moment of my childhood. I have like a smattering of some memories about some stuff that happened, most of which are probably like filled in with imagination. I have a smattering of things that I remember from like my adolescence, many of which are probably filled in by imagination. So, you know, I mean, this would be like, if I record a movie with my phone and play it back, every single thing that was on that screen is on that phone. If I watch a movie and then you ask me to recite the movie and everything that happened from start to finish, I'm not going to remember the specific dialogue. There are probably going to be characters' names that I've already forgotten. I'm not going to remember, was there a Dutch angle used on this scene? What color was the drapes in the protagonist's, you know, living room? I'm not going to remember those things. Neither are most people.
You can go back right now, 20 years, recall a memory, and even recall details about that memory, record the emotions of that memory. Now, all of this we are supposed to believe is the product of a blind, naturalistic, mechanistic process.
Why not? This is just an argument from incredulity at this point. What's the actual argument against that? Other than just like, are we supposed to believe that? It's like, well, yeah, that seems to be the case. I mean, in lieu of a better explanation.
Without intentionality, that's ludicrous. Now,
No,
there's
it's not.
3 ways that somebody can explain biological design.
Why are they not? I thought these were timed. Why are they not being like, okay, that time's up. Next one.
Biological design is either the result of chance, or it's necessity, it was just meant to be that way, or there is a God, there is a designer. Now, if you're going to say it's chance, then we might as well not have a conversation, because everything can be chance. Anything can be due to chance.
I mean, this is a really weird sort of fallback position, because it's not chance. There are forces at work. They're just not forces that have intentionality. Like the river that carved out the Grand Canyon did not intend to carve out the Grand Canyon. It just happened to do that over time. I use an analogy a while back of like the spiral graph, how you put, you have the little circle with the ridges on it, and then you have another little circle that you put inside, and you have a pen, and there's little holes, and you can put the pen in there and you spin it around, and it forms different patterns and stuff. None of those patterns are by design. They're just things that emerge when certain physical elements interact in particular ways.
I could simply gamble all of my life savings and put them in the lottery, and I could say, well, there's a chance. But human beings don't act like that. Chance is not something that can make something as sophisticated as the human brain or other things that we point out in terms of biological design. Necessity. Well,
I mean, we've seen plenty of things in nature that are complex, like weather systems are complex. No one believes, no one intelligent anyway, believes in 2024 that God is planning every storm, planning every tornado, planning when it's going to rain. Like, there is a complex interplay of, pressure systems and temperatures that go into making the weather. And this is why, we have predictive models that can see what these things are going to do. That doesn't mean a storm is not a complex thing. It is a complex thing, but it's an understandable thing. It's something that we can look at conditions now and say, based on the conditions that we see right now, what will happen in the future? And, we can see like these two weather systems are going to pull moisture in from, this place, and that's going to form a storm here, and it's probably going to take this trajectory, and we're probably going to see this much rainfall, and then in the northern part, we're going to see this much snowfall. Like, we can see all of that, but no one believes that every instant of that is being controlled by like God or some sort of like intentional force. We know that this is just based on interactions of natural phenomena. And that's just, we can predict that in the short term. So the idea that something like the human brain could not arise over billions of years, pretty absurd, especially when we can actually describe every step of the way how that came to be. We can see what the primitive precursor to the human brain was. And we can see that, our brains are more sophisticated than a chimpanzee brain, and a chimpanzee brain is more sophisticated than a dog brain, and a dog brain is more sophisticated than a lizard brain, and a lizard brain is more sophisticated than the rudimentary proto brain of like a sea anemone or something.
what's necessary about us being the way that we are? We could have been otherwise. We could have not existed. So that's a non-starter. So if we logically break it down, the only logical possibility is that there is a designer behind the design. And this is completely natural and intuitive to believe. But the Darwinist one...
it might be natural and intuitive, but, human beings have a tendency to personify things. Like, prior to us understanding the water cycle, we believed that there were gods that were responsible for the rain. We now know that's not true. We used to think that there were gods that controlled when the volcano erupted. We now know that's not true. We know about geology and plate tectonics and things of that nature. So this is just sort of a God of the gaps argument. But in this instance, we're not even dealing with an actual gap. We are dealing with a presupposed gap that really only exists in this guy's mind. Because, Darwinian evolutionary theory can explain how the complexity of the brain arose. Now, it might not be able to explain every single detail of that, but broad strokes, we've pretty much got it figured out.
want us to believe that behind design, there's an illusion of design. And that is a much harder proposition to swallow.
It's not really so much that there's an illusion of design. It's that there is an illusion of intentionality behind that design.
Couldn't this universe have come into being by chance,
Yes.
out of billions of possibilities?
Yep.
I would say if we were to entertain such a ridiculous possibility, then we could claim the same about anything else.
Sure.
If you see $100 enter your bank account, you could say somebody in Mexico was accidentally putting in their details and they accidentally put in my details. You could claim anything about anything. there would be no reason to do science, because you would study a natural phenomena, and rather than giving the most plausible explanation, you could take any number of infinite ad hoc explanations and say, it could have been this, it could have been that. However, we as human beings don't operate like that.
I mean, that doesn't really seem like a problem. I mean, if you jump to a conclusion without evidence, then that's one thing. Like if you were to say like, well, it could have been this, it could have been that, and then you just jump to a conclusion based on maybe, then that would be a problem. By the way, that's exactly what you do when you say it was God. But when you have a bunch of possibilities and you say, all right, well, let's figure out which one it actually is. Let's run some experimentation. Let's posit some hypotheses and test them. That's a whole other matter. Saying that there are different possibilities for how things could have happened, that's not ascientific. That's pretty much the basis of science. That's hypothesizing. But what you then do after you hypothesize is you test the hypothesis. And you see, you create a predictive model, and then you see if that predictive model has explanatory power. And if it does, then that is an effective and useful model for understanding reality. If it doesn't have predictive power, then clearly you need to go back to the drawing board. I mean, I was kind of hoping this would be a more sophisticated degree of sophistry than this.
There's a 1% chance that a drink I'm about to give you has poison, and 99% chance you'll be fine. You're going to refuse that drink. Probabilities help us make decisions. We don't just say to ourselves, well, chances are I'll be okay, so I'll be fine with that. Now, if I told you there's 99% poison in there that could kill you and 1% that you'll be fine, you definitely wouldn't take that. So we use probabilities to come up with...
All right, so the timer is just pointless, I guess. There's a timer, but it means nothing.
Reasons for our behavior, conclusions for how we should be living. So when it comes to God,
I don't even really understand the point he's trying to make about probability here. Maybe it's going to come, be crystallized by what he's about to say next. Let's see.
Why do we throw those probabilities out? Why do we go with the most absurd ideas? Well, the universe is highly improbable, but there is a chance.
I mean, I would say it's way more improbable to have to posit something that's never been observed to explain something. Like, to me, looking at natural reality and then positing, well, there must have been an all-powerful creator that did this. That is the most improbable solution you could possibly come up with, right? I mean, it's way more probable that the solutions are something that's within the observable universe than it is to posit something that's outside the observable universe. Like, that just makes sense, right? Like, if you get the $100 in your bank account, the idea that, well, maybe someone put in the wrong details, that's a actual possibility. The idea that the $100 appeared because a magic being showed up and put it there, that's a much less likely possibility.
The inconsistency is explained by the fact that people don't want to believe in God. Because whoever's consistent, they would never entertain the idea that this universe, with all its vast complexity, can be the result of blind chance.
What do you see?
I mean, no one says it is. I mean, literally no one says blind chance made the universe. No atheist has ever taken that position. Like, it seems like what they want to say is just that, like, the atheist position is that there was nothing, and then boom, the fucking endless complexity of the universe. When really that's more what they're saying, because they're saying there was nothing, and then boom, the endless complexity of God or whatever. What atheists are saying is that things started off with much more simple constituent elements, and that over time, the interaction of those elements created the level of sophistication we see today.
Say to those who say that as science develops, it eliminates belief and explains everything.
As the torchlight of science illuminates the dark room, the room for theism dissipates. So as we discover more and more, there is less for God to explain. That's the general idea. This can be challenged by a simple verse of the Quran. Allah mentions in the Quran, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Do you not see the birds up in the sky? And those birds, they are folding their wings and bringing them in, and none holds them up except Allah." So there's two things going on in this.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure birds are not held up by Allah. I'm pretty sure they're held up by like air currents and shit like that, but okay.
The first is that Allah acknowledges there's something mechanical going on because Allah points to the wings. But then Allah says none holds them up except Allah. So here we have two types of explanation.
Yes, one of which is accurate and the other of which is made up unnecessary bullshit.
We have a mechanical explanation, a how explanation,
Sure.
and we have a why explanation or an agency explanation. These are two complementary types of explanation.
No, they're two contradictory types of explanation. And even if you want to ask why, not just how a bird flies, but why, the why is that there is an advantage to being able to fly that evolved over time.
The atheist wants us to believe that the mechanical challenges the agency. We would say the mechanical and the agency go hand in hand. So as science develops, as we understand photosynthesis, as we understand how the universe expands and changes, as we understand the mechanisms, it doesn't mean that the agency is removed. If anything, the existence of the agency is reinforced by the discovery of the mechanism. So the converse is true to what
This guy is trying to do like an inverse God of the gaps and say that every time we discover how something actually works, that's just the how, but the why is still God. In many instances, the question of why is sort of a very like anthropocentric question anyway, because why in and of itself kind of implies agency. But even in the questions where why is an applicable, I mean, even in the instances where why is an applicable question, the why could still be something completely naturalistic in origin. Like, the reason why I have eyeballs is because it's advantageous to see. And not all living things have eyeballs. Like, bacteria don't have eyeballs. They navigate by different means. And we can see that, hey, there was once, and I guess for some organisms there still is, a very primitive version of the eyeball, an eyeball 1.0 that's just like, hey, there's a little bit more light sensitivity in this region. So, you know, this thing can tell which way light is. It can sort of separate light from darkness. And then you have a slightly more sophisticated eye that can tell the difference between this shape and that shape. And then so on and so forth until you arrive at the human eye, or maybe like a superior eye to ours, like the hawk eye.
They claim
Not
as
the
science
Marvel
progresses, the explanatory power of theism increases.
But we have laws.
I would love to fucking have an explanation of how. I mean, this is 100% pure absolute sophistry. This has no bearing on reality whatsoever. This dude is just leaving things out and misattributing ideas to secular worldviews that secularists do not espouse or possess in any way, shape, or form. It seems that he cannot possibly make the arguments he's making without strawmanning the opposition and just, you know, being reductive and saying like, oh, well, you know, in the eyes of the atheist, this just all boils down to chance.
Of physics in the universe and things are happening in order. Do we need a God to explain the universe?
I would say that's a false dichotomy, because the atheist is pitting the laws of the universe against God. But that's not sensible. The real question is, since there are laws that both atheists and theists agree on, what is the best explanation of those laws? Is it that those laws came about by naturalism, by nothing, by...
This is sneaky bullshit right here, because instead of recognizing that the laws of the universe are descriptive laws, he's acting like they're prescriptive laws. So a human law is like, don't murder, because if you do, we're going to try to catch you and we're going to put you in jail. That's a human law. That's our attempt to impose some sort of order on reality. The laws of nature are not prescriptive laws, like something that's written and you can't defy it. They're descriptive laws. It's like, hey, when these two elements interact in this sort of space in these conditions, this is how we can expect them to act. So the laws of nature are descriptive laws, not prescriptive laws. And as such, they don't need some sort of authority or otherworldly presence to enforce them.
Everything being broken down to natural processes and materials? Or is it the case that behind these laws and patterns, there is an intelligence? There is something superior to matter? And the latter makes a lot more sense than the former.
Why? It doesn't, though, because you've had to posit something that cannot be observed. If you have two fucking explanations for something, and one of them evokes observable things and the other one evokes unobservable things, then it makes much more sense, Occam's razor, to use the explanation that is contingent on observable things that we know to be real, and does not need to posit magical things that no one has ever seen or observed before.
Some people say the creator may have set the laws and might have left. What do you say to those people?
I would say, imagine a factory where somebody hires 1,000 people, puts rules in place, puts regulations in place, says goodbye to everyone for 10,000 years. Would that place last a month, let alone 10,000 years? What would be the most natural thing to do if you created something? Would it be to just ignore it as if it doesn't exist? Or would it be to actively participate, actively support, actively make it function? The idea of there being a God who creates things and moves away is not the idea of a God who is wise and all-knowing and all-powerful and all-caring and loving and merciful. That's a negligent God, and that's not a God that theism posits.
What do you say to him?
Yeah, but it could very well be the explanation for God. I mean, even if you make a deistic argument, you still have your work cut out for you to arrive at a theistic conclusion, because you have to show that that God is actually meddling in human affairs. And it seems like they want to have their cake and eat it too with this, because whenever something bad happens, whenever something happens that is like this grave injustice or nightmarish, horrible thing, and millions of people die or thousands of people die or whatever, or, you know, there's starvation and poverty and disease and suffering, it's always laid at the feet of, oh, well, free will. You know, God doesn't interfere because we have free will, and for God to interfere would violate free will. But then they also want to act like God must be interfering because otherwise we wouldn't live in this perfectly ordered universe. But the universe is not perfectly ordered. The universe is a fucking realm of chaos. And like anybody who just like has lived on this planet knows that this is not some sort of beautiful, well-oiled machine that just chugs along perfectly. There is death, there is suffering, there is discord, there is disorder, there is immense vulnerability to the forces of nature. There is the distinct possibility that a meteor could slam into this son of a bitch and destroy us the same way it did with the dinosaurs. So this idea that the universe is this perfectly ordered thing that's created just for us and it's got us in mind and it cares about our fate is totally ludicrous when looking at the available information.
Materialist who says that I don't believe what I don't see.
The answer is pretty simple. We don't see God, but we see God's creation. In many domains of human knowledge, we don't see the cause, but we see the effect. A detective may see footsteps and infers from the footsteps that there was a human being here. If you walk past a beach and you see writing and it says, I love you, you would think somebody took a stick and wrote that. You didn't see it happen, but you infer. We can see biological design.
This is totally different because we know from experience how footprints are made. We have seen that when human beings walk on certain terrain, they create footprints. We have seen the means of creating writing on sand in a beach, and we know how it's done from experience. So we can make that inference. But we have never seen God come and create biological organisms. We have never seen God, period. So to make an inference that this thing or that thing was created by God is totally ludicrous because we've never observed God doing that. We have observed human beings making footprints. We have observed human beings making writing.
We can see the night sky. We can see design all around us. We can see the thirst human beings have for spirituality. We can see the morals that we have. All of these things together are best explained by a creator. And us as human beings, if we were to, within our lifetimes, apply the rule that whatever you see, you believe, and whatever you don't see, you don't believe, we wouldn't believe in historical events because we haven't seen them.
I mean, plenty of people do either deny historical events happened or deny that they happened the way that they have been described. There are plenty of things that people believe about history that have been basically proven wrong. We do not have a perfect accounting of the past, and history is oftentimes written by the victors. So yes, it is okay to be skeptical of history. But at the end of the day, we do know that the events of history were promulgated primarily by human beings, and human beings doing things that we know human beings do, like going to war and having sex and doing drugs and so on and so forth. Things that we can observe are part of human behavior. We have never observed God doing a goddamn thing. So this argument makes no sense.
A testimonial. We wouldn't believe in morals because we can't see them. We wouldn't believe in love and hope and fear because we can't see those.
We can experience those things, though. We know that love and hope and fear exist within us because we've all experienced those things. We have all experienced, what is my attraction to this other person? Why do I care so much about them? Oh, it must be love. And we can, by the way, we can observe that, you know, in terms of brain chemistry, by the way. We know that like oxytocin and, you know, those things are going wild. Hope. We've all experienced hope. And we've all experienced abandoning hope, like on this show. We all have experienced these things. We've all experienced fear. Why do I not want to go near that poisonous snake? What is this thing that's preventing me from doing that? It's fucking fear. Why is my heart racing? Like, all of the things that you're talking about are observable.
So whichever way you look at it, it doesn't make sense to claim that what you can't see, you can't believe in. As long as we can see the effect, we should believe in the cause.
You didn't cite one single thing. I mean, if you cannot see it, you shouldn't believe in it. That doesn't just mean like see it with your eyes. That means observe any aspect of it. By this argument, we should be like, oh, well, there must be leprechauns because, you know, pots of rainbows exist. And it's been said that there's a leprechaun at the end of them. So there's got to be leprechauns because, like, you could see it. Like, why would there be a rainbow there if there wasn't a leprechaun at the end of it with a pot of gold? I mean, it's that level of stupid.
Say to those who accepts multiverse.
I would say accepting multiverse would not undermine the existence of God. The way that some people use multiverse is as if they could use it as a substitute for God. So we have this universe which is designed, which has clear order, and the way that this universe is explained by some is that they are big.
We already pretty much addressed this in the last one of these videos we did. We addressed the multiverse arguments pretty extensively in the video, How to Shut Up an Atheist. I'm bored with this. We've addressed this thing. We know exactly what arguments this guy's going to make. We've heard them 1,000 times before. And I think it's kind of revealing, by the way, that nothing this guy has said is specific to Islam. Every single one of these arguments that he's made so far could just as easily be made by a Christian, could just as easily be made by a Jew. That's how non-specific and vague these things really are. Like, if you have a book that is the truth of the universe, then you would think that you would have arguments specific to that book. But instead, what they have is a bunch of vague shit. Because, you know, everything this guy said, he could just as easily be a Christian. He could just as easily be a Jew. There is nothing specifically Muslim about these arguments. And I think that alone speaks volumes. But I cannot handle any more of this. It's driving me nuts. These arguments are terrible. We've heard them 1,000 times before. They're clumsy. They're silly. They don't take everything into account. They're basically sophistry. They have no bearing on reality whatsoever.
Amen.